So in this next session, we're going to get to hear from the art side of our organisation, from one of the artists that we've worked with, and the industry side of our organisation. The Art and Industry Trust was founded with equal weighting on art and industry, and Darryn George, who's a local artist, art educator, and one of the artists involved with the sixth SCAPE, is going to start that discussion around his involvement with SCAPE and to look at other works as well. And then we're going to hear from the chairman of the Art and Industry Trust, Bob Blyth. So just to make things a little bit easy to give you an overview and an introduction to them both, I'll do that now, and then I'll let Darryn and Bob do their tag team, so to speak. So they're going to talk to the sponsorship cycle, what's involved with that. Darryn George has shown paintings in major public exhibitions at the Christchurch Art Gallery, the Govett Brewster Art Gallery, the Wellington City Gallery and the Auckland City Gallery and Te Papa. His work is represented by the top art dealers in the country and further afield. His paintings are represented in important private and public collections throughout New Zealand, overseas, and he has completed numerous commissions, including a very large one, the large glass for Deutsche Bank head office in New Zealand. It was my absolute pleasure to work with Darryn for the sixth SCAPE. It was it definitely was the most challenging project that I've ever worked on in my whole career, with two earthquakes interrupting it and a snowstorm as well. So I'm sure you'll get to hear of that story. But an incredibly large work at 900 square metres, the Lamb's Book of Life, did come to life, and it's got quite an extraordinary story, so I'm looking forward to hearing that from Darryn. Bob is a wonderful man because he ends up as an engineer solving many of my problems for me when they arise. Hopefully he's equipped me with a few more skills these days so I don't have to pick up the phone and say, Bob, where do I go for that? So I think he's got a great network, he's got a great set of skills in terms of understanding the industry side and a real passion for the arts, which brings a good level head to our board as the chairman. So it's great to have you with us today, Bob. Bob was educated in Scotland. He's a Scotsman, and my heritage is also from Scotland, so I think we get on quite well in that sense. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from the Edinburgh University. He works as a consulting engineer, and he has worked in both the UK and the Middle East before coming to New Zealand. In the UK, he was seconded for 16 years into the London Docklands Development Corporation, heading the project management and engineering team in the massive development of 2,250 hectares in East London, and that development, you may well know, had a public art component to it as well. At the moment, Bob is the project director for the multidisciplinary practice Becca, working on a variety of projects in the South Island. And like many engineers, he's been really, really busy here in Christchurch after the earthquakes. Bob is also a board member of Lifeline New Zealand, and he's, as I said, the chairman of SCAPE. Welcome, Darryn.
Okay, thank you, Deborah, and thank you very much for inviting me to be here, and it's lovely to see everyone here this morning. I've been asked to speak on partnering art with industry, and I've been given approximately 20 minutes to speak on that. Having sort of looked at that and looked at bits and pieces over the years, I realise I'm going to have to sharpen up the parameters be quite brutal in terms of where I set the boundaries this morning. So I won't be able to talk about the influences in my work. I won't be able to talk about the content in my work. I won't be able to even talk about my painting practice, which is the main part of what I do in the studio. So I won't be able to talk about any of that. And instead, I'll confine my boundaries just to simply talking about the projects that I've been involved with industries. Okay. Now, in presenting information like this, it might be hard to kind of pick up a stylistic development that goes on in my work, and there is a book up here, so feel free if you want to sort of get a bit of background in terms of what the rest of my work's about, look, just help yourself have a look through the book. But I will highlight today a couple of valuable lessons that I've learned from working with industries, and it's been a real pleasure to work with them, and every single one has been a real pleasure, and there's a few lessons that I've learned. Up until 8 years ago, I had never worked with anyone else apart from myself. I'd been in the studio, painting, a lonely business. There's no one else involved. And that's quite that's quite usual for a painter, whereas a sculptor has got a lot more complex processes involved, and so they're always going out and talking with different industries. But for me as a painter, it was just always me alone by myself. Now, I got a ring from Emma Bugden from the Wellington City Gallery in 2004. She was putting together the Prospect exhibition, and she said, "Darryn, I'd like you to make a wall work." And I thought, okay, that sounds great. I don't even know what a wall work is. And she said, well, it's where you basically, we'll give you a whole wall and you will paint it with one of your designs. So the process will be that you design something on your computer, send it through to us, and then go down to Resine Colour Shop and get all the colours and stuff sorted out, post that through with all the dimensions, and then basically we'll have a team of people up here at the Wellington City Gallery which will paint the whole thing for you. So I thought, okay, that sounds great. Went ahead, and this is my little wee drawing that I did on my computer. Now the whole time I was kind of just thinking, I had kind of measurements and stuff in my head, but it was me on my laptop, not even thinking about how this thing would operate in a space. Everything was sent off, and over a space of about 2 weeks, the staff and the technicians worked away on it. And this is the work that they produced. And photo perhaps doesn't do it justice, but I came off the aeroplane expecting kind of thinking about my little wee drawing here, and I stood in front of it, and it's 12.5 metres long by nearly 3 metres high, and so the feeling of scale was amazing. Like for me it was, wow, I hadn't kind of figured the scale thing would be so grand. So a couple of things started to spark off in my head. Number one, if I worked with industries, I could perhaps start to look at scale, increasing the scale to something more architectural, and that was something that really interested me with my work, especially making geometric abstraction. And the second thing is that I looked up close, and the masking tape work on this painting was fantastic. It was way better than I was doing back in the studio. And so as they brought in, real specialists in this area, I could see, wow, the level of professionalism and the execution of these works can actually be taken up a few notches. So that's when I started to think about working with people outside of my studio. About the same time I was approached by Workshop, the fashion label, and they said, look, we'd be interested in making a series of t-shirts based on your paintings. And I thought, oh, okay, I hadn't kind of thought about my work going into t-shirts, but we'll give it a go and see what happens. So I flew up to Auckland, went into their design room, and it was just a fun, collaborative kind of, I was bringing out my photos of my work on my laptop, and there's all sorts of bits of copying and pasting from different core fi-fi designs, and it was a fantastic afternoon of designing in a collaborative team. And this is a series of t-shirts they brought out. I liked the process so much I started to work with Global Culture, who brought out a series of t-shirts as well. And for me, I was curious to see how these things some of the works were quite big, the paintings that were quite big, but to see them kind of drop down in scale just to fit on a t-shirt was something that I was kind of curious about. So I thought I'll just keep pursuing it. Just after that, I was approached by Deutsche Bank, and they said, look, we've got this big office that we're redeveloping up in Auckland, in the Vero Centre, and we've got an office space that's got a large sheet of glass running straight through the middle of their office space as it divides up the space, and it's 17 metres long and about nearly 3 metres high. And they said the glass is made of smart glass, which in effect is a glass that it has electrical current running through it, and when you turn the switch on, the glass becomes completely clear. You turn off the switch and the glass becomes cloudy. And I thought, wow, I've never heard of this sort of stuff. That sounds awesome. And they said, can you put your designs on both sides of this glass? And I thought, yep, that sounds real, yeah, I'll do that. But I had no idea I was kind of getting myself into. So I started just doing my designs and doing some little drawings and stuff. And I was starting to think about, almost setting it up like a whare and just wharenui, and just kind of, having these kind of designs down this large glass. I flew up to the space, had a look at it when it was halfway completed, made some drawings, some computer-generated drawings. Then I kind of came up with this kind of drawing here. And the Deutsche Bank team said, that looks really what we're after. It's got a New Zealand kind of a flavour to it. And I did some kind of elevation drawings and things like that, just to kind of, make it a bit more easier for them to read. And I said, yep, let's go for that. And then they said, but it's got to be on the smart glass. So think about when it'll be switched on, when it'll be switched off. You want some of your panels to be transparent, see-through. Some of them you want to be opaque so you can't see through it. So with that, I had no understanding of what this glass would do, and there was none of it in the country at the time. So I rang up Sign Man, which is they do shop fittings and things like that up in Auckland, and they're a fantastic company. I said, hey, look, I've got to put this design onto smart glass. And they said, yep, look, we know all about smart glass. What we can do is we can do some of your panels, we'll make it transparent. Some of your panels will make it like it's really opaque. Some of the laminates we can put on to make it really glossy, so in the darker areas, and some of the areas where the sun's kind of coming onto the glass, you want it to be matte so there's not too much reflection going on. And they kept on talking about all these different options. So what I did was I said, hey, look, here's my design, you go for it. I gave them free rein, just you do what you want to do. And that was, for me, it was a bit of a risk. It felt like a bit of a risk. But I knew that they had a lot of experience in this realm, so I thought, right, I've designed it, and I'm bringing the aesthetic, I'm bringing the kind of the concept to the work. I'm going to let the industry here now take over and just bring their A game to this project and just see what happens. And this is what we produced here. Sorry, it's not clearer than that, but 17 metres long. Certain parts of the glass are transparent, you can see through it. Some of the parts it's opaque. And we could change that again with the smart glass so that actually we could reverse it round. Some parts became, the parts that were opaque became transparent. So it was quite a cool project to work on, and the industry really did come up with some interesting kind of ways of dealing with things. Just after that, Justin Patton approached me and he said, Darryn, we'd like you to go to the Christchurch City Art Gallery and to work in the Sutton room, the Sutton Gallery, and to make a wall work that was going to completely cover all the walls in that gallery. And it was always the intention from the start to work with a team of technicians and painters. So I thought, rightio, that sounds good. We'll give it a go. This is the Sutton Gallery when it had a show in it. And so basically I went home, got on my computer, and this is a pretty garish kind of a drawing, but I started basically just doing some drawings on my laptop, exactly the same as I did for the Prospect show a few years earlier. Once we got the drawings and things kind of all shaped out and drawn up, and there was a lot of talking back and forward between Justin Patton and I. So it was very much a collaborative kind of way of working in terms of the design of this work. And then we approached Miller's Studio. Now these guys are basically sign writers, so they do everything by hand. And there was about 5 of them that worked on this project. This is Greg, the head painter, and basically for 5 weeks from start to finish they just completely painted out all of the walls with my design. They initially went up and kind of put tracing paper over all of the walls, and so that my design was put onto the walls, and then by hand, no masking tape at all, they just simply started painting with their brushes and painting the whole thing in. And these guys were just amazing as well. The technical ability of their painting was just incredible. They could get such straight lines. The surfaces were just beautiful. At lunchtimes, I'd go in and visit them, and at the start of the whole project, they said, "Hey, Darryn, we don't want you to touch any brushes in this. This is all our space, so don't touch any of the brushes." Oh, okay, right, yeah. Because I thought I was going to get my overalls on, have a bit of a paint, and they said, no, we'll take over from here. But the interesting thing was at lunchtime, we had such a great time with these guys. At lunchtime, I'd go down and visit them, and they'd give me lessons on how to paint. And that was kind of, I sort of felt like I had to take the humble seat in front of these guys. But yeah, they gave me lots of tips on how to paint properly. Now, this was the design for, there's a pole right in the centre of the gallery, and this was my design for that central pole. And I had a white line at the bottom, a white line through here, bringing around the post, and then one at the top as well. I left it at that, and that was the way I intended the work to look. I went up to Auckland, and 3 days before the opening, Greg rang me up and said, "Oh, Darryn, look, I've been painting on this work now for 5 weeks, and I really understand what's happening in the space here. And I think you've got it wrong when it comes to that post. What you need to do is to drop out that line at the bottom and at the top." And I said, "Why is that?" And he said, "Well, what you want to do is try and create an effect of the earth or the floor being connected to the ceiling. Now, if those lines were taken out, you're going to get this black surface on the ground, you're going to get this post, and then you're going to go right up into the black of the ceiling in the sky." And he said, "It'll work on a metaphorical level." So here he is telling me, all these kind of... and it'll also work on an aesthetic level. Now, I was up in Auckland, I had no way of going down and checking it. So I just, on the spur of the moment, I said, "Greg, you've been there, you understand this work way better now than I do. Your gut feeling is that?" And he said, "Absolutely." I said, "Rightio, do it." So he went ahead and painted out the white lines. And I think it's way better the way that he did it. And so one of the lessons I learnt there is, if a person's involved in a project for a long period of time, always trust them. Trust the person that's at the coalface. I think for me, I had all the theory and the kind of the conceptual stuff, but he actually knew the work way better than I did. So trust the person that's right there that's doing the work. So that really helped me with my confidence to just keep trusting these guys. The next group industry to come in was Delana Rugs, and they said, "We would like to take some of your paintings and turn them into rugs." And I thought, look, I've had such great experiences before with other industries, you go for it. And I said, look, just come into the studio, you choose any work you want, and then basically you do whatever you want to the work. Let's just see what happens. So initially they took a little work, it was this size here, and the moku design in the centre is it's quite detailed, it's very delicate, it's quite fine, it's made with a small fine paintbrush. And they said, look, that's something we think we can work with. And so they made a rug that was 2 metres across by 1.5 metres high. And they carved out the area that I can't carve out with a brush. They created texture or raised, embossed relief areas and areas that I can't do with a paintbrush. And for me, that was quite interesting to see. it was quite cool to see a different interpretation, but also new possibilities perhaps that I could try and investigate a little bit further into the future. So for me, it was like I was seeing new ways of approaching some of my old paintings. They took a work like this here, which was highly glossy, like it's got a lacquered finish on it. You can see yourself, it's like a mirror. It's really, really highly finished. Yeah, just very, very reflective. And their interpretation was, what happens if we reverse it round and make it a dense black? So it's very, very black, it's matte. You look into it, it just sucks up all the light, whereas the other painting just reflects light. There's so much kind of depth kind of going on. This one here, it's like, boom, it's there. It's amazing presence to it. So for me, again, trusting them to bring their A game to what I do really inspired me to go back to the studio and try fresh approaches with the things that I've taken for granted. Okay, I've just put this one in here. Stephen Cleland from Te Tuhi, I know he's with the physics room now, project managed this one here, and won't actually talk in depth about that. But one of the things that was beginning to happen is that the work was becoming slicker and slicker and slicker. And I think for me, working on canvas with oil paint was starting to become a bit of a problem because I couldn't actually get the surfaces that I wanted to. I couldn't actually get a slick finish that I wanted to with the old approach. So I approached car painters and I started working on aluminium, and I found one car painter who is just fantastic. So him and I have worked in tandem, where I come up with the designs and things, and we go down and he uses all his spray painting experience to create just these highly reflective mirror-like finishes. Again, he's able to bring a level of professionalism in the execution of a work that I could never bring. Okay, and we'll come to this last part here. In 2009, I was approached by the SCAPE team to put an artwork up for the SCAPE 2010 Biennale Biennial. And what we did was we walked around a few sites and we chose this building here, which is the Government Life building. And my initial idea was to put perhaps some sort of big banner on the side of this building. And so I simply took some of my paintings and just photoshopped them onto the side there just to see what they would look like. What would it look like if we covered a whole wall? And then eventually we landed up with this design here, which is based on my filing cabinet. I basically opened up my filing cabinet one day. There was all these folders kind of stacked back with the little wee tags kind of on the top. And so what I did is I did a simple drawing of that, and then just started to repeat that same pattern over and over again until we've got this design here. Now, I probably ran out of time to tell you the story, but yes, Deborah, when we first took the drawings to Deborah and the team, they approved the drawings, and from there it was a matter of, can we actually pull off this project, because it was pretty ambitious in terms of its scale. So at that, Deborah brought in engineers, funding partners, lawyers, counsel for consent process, surveyors, printers, building companies. There was a whole raft of industries that were brought in, and there was a lot of talking around the table, can we actually pull this thing off? And then Scientech was brought in. They said, hey, look, you've got to have some problems here in terms of, if it's a big sail that's sitting on the side of a building made of PVC, if the wind gets in behind that, that could just rip that building to pieces. So they went off and found some scrim material. It looked like PVC from a distance, but when you get up close, it's made up completely of holes, and so the wind just goes in and out. And then we thought, okay, we've got that part sort of sorted out, and funding was seeming to be going okay. And then the next issue was how do we actually hang up this thing? And then Hawkins Construction came in and said, look, they worked with Becca and said, yeah, I think, look, we can do it. We've done kind of big scrim things to cover up scaffolding on building before. I think we can start to pull this off. So there was this gentle kind of negotiation. It was all being led by Deborah and her team, and kept on going, until the point where we actually knew that we could do it. But then, of course, there was 2 earthquakes, and I won't have time to talk about that this morning. There was a couple of earthquakes which stopped the whole project, so we had to move to a different site. Construction underway. So we had to move to a new site, which is the council buildings, and Ngāi Tahu approved, and we thought, okay, great, let's put up the design on this building here. The work was rejigged in terms of its scale, it was reprinted, and then it was installed. So we had a whole team of abseilers installing it, and that's the work there completed. Now, I have to say at this point, art and industry were awesome. Well, the SCAPE team were absolutely awesome in producing this work. All I did was sowed the seeds at the start. I designed it on my little laptop and then basically gave it over, and the team negotiated, worked through, and as Deborah said before, it was a long process, and it was frustrating at times, but it was amazing to see the resilience of that team as they worked things through. They did it, not me. I have the greatest admiration for Deb and her team, for Quinn Henderson and his team at Hawkins Construction, and Andy Rowden, who was the man who put a lot of time in behind the scenes to actually make this thing work, and also Signtech. So I want to thank you, Deborah, and your team for allowing me to work with you, because that was a real privilege, and to see it hung like that was just something very, very special. So thank you. Here's Bob, he was speaking next. Okay, in terms of what I'm doing this year, and this is just a very brief, we've just done a work up at the Tauranga Art Gallery, and it's another wall work. So again, another team has been involved. We've got Jamie Richardson, so if anyone knows Jamie Richardson, who used to be here at the physics room, he's the man that's been project managing this one. And that's the work there. It's 7.5 metres high and it's 10 metres across. You can get a sense of scale there as a person down the bottom. And then the next project I'm looking at doing is working with this guy here, Craig Pocock, and he's a landscape architect, and he's made this work. You might have seen that work before outside the museum a couple of years ago, and he's got the technology to make hanging gardens. So he's quite interested in taking one of my paintings and starting to work that into different planting and to hang up a big kind of plant painting next year. And then this is a project we're starting to work on at Connells Bay, and again that'll have industrial processes involved as we work with the different aluminiums and stuff on that work. Okay, that's about it from me, but just to say it's been an honour working with the different industries on each project. They've each brought a level of professionalism and the execution that I could never bring as an artist. It's become apparent to me that I bring in the aesthetic and the concepts, and then they basically bring a fantastic finish to executing the final work. Second lesson I've learned is always respect the experts in their different realms. So if it's industries that you're involved in, just let them do what they do, where they've got experience in different parts of your project. Let them do their thing. Let them talk about things with you, but again, encourage them to bring out their best and to really extend their own practice as well. And lastly, if you're an artist and you get the opportunity to work with different industries, I want to say embrace it. Give it a go. You might think, well, hang on, making stuff on t-shirts, I don't know if I really want to do that kind of thing, but look, every experience I've had has been brilliant and it's brought new ideas into the studio practice. So please, if If that's one thing I can get across to you, if you get the opportunity, just give it a crack, see what happens. And that's about all for me. I'm sorry, I've probably gone 5 minutes over time. So, yeah. But thank you again for listening. Cheers.
The one thing that Darryn hasn't mentioned was the sleepless nights. Hanging that material up on that gable of that wall, I can assure you, was a few sleepless nights, especially when the snow started and the wind started. Forget the earthquakes, but it was a fantastic project to work on. It really was. It was challenging. And Darryn's been saying everybody else was good to work with. He was superb to work with. He really was. He listens, and we were able to analyse. It was excellent. I'm Bob. As Deborah said, no, well, maybe didn't say, because I told her not to. I've been 46 years in the construction industry, so I've got a bit of experience. And I was involved in the London Docklands for 16 years. And London Docklands, in actual fact, did a lot for me with art. The Victorians, when they actually finished a piece of infrastructure, used to leave a memento, i.e. a sculpture. So we decided in Docklands that we'd try some of it. And this is a tunnel just outside Docklands. That artwork up there was £750,000 10 years ago. And there's 6 of these artworks, the large artworks. So I think the Victorians got it right, and we've actually got to persuade the council and people like that, and Transit or NZTA that are now, to actually start putting sculpture behind their roads, etc. You can tell I'm the old-fashioned one. I've got the paper. That was a small one in Docklands as well that I had major problems with, because it's a Christmas tree made of traffic signals, and they actually had them flashing. And after several accidents, my career as an engineer was almost over, because they asked my opinion. I said, "Go for it," you know. But supporting public art. Art and Industry Trust sponsorship is in quite a few guises. There's cash. Cash is always king. You know, you get that cash. Pro bono professional services, solicitors, engineers. Pro bono construction services, like the ones that Hawkins did for Darryn. And then discounts. We're great on discounts. These are a few of the options. But before you get these options, we've got to look at the sponsorship cycle. There are real challenges for art and industry. Generating income to match aspirations, demonstrating value to sponsors over a 2-year cycle. Public art is not like any other of the art or arts, as there is no revenue, none really. The orchestra or the ballet or something in the arts, they can actually have tickets and sell tickets so they can get some revenue. We source our funding and sponsorship from Creative New Zealand, City Council, contractors, corporates, individuals, private sector trusts. Not just in New Zealand, we have overseas as well. About half our income comes from the private sector. Most of them want to see what they get for their buck. What is the return of their investment? Well, there are many ways we can actually qualify that. Exposure and alignment with the brand. The brand is always important. With the arts product. The opportunity to mix and mingle with the arts world. For some of the corporates, the arts world is something is out to the side. They find out when they work to begin with, it's an exciting world to be in, even though you're just on the periphery. But to know you've helped is really good. So the companies get the goodwill factor. We want to deliver something good for the city, permanent and temporary, and to create a good impression that their businesses, with their key stakeholders and communities that they work in. In SCAPE, we have to plan over a 2-year cycle. nobody really understands a biennial. You know, you've got to get funding for 2 years' time. Sponsors I don't think understand it. I just look at it quite simply. We've got 1 year to get the money in and another year to spend it. Is that right, Deb? Yeah. One of the biggest challenges for a biennial is also the long lead time, maintaining existing relationships with existing sponsors and working at adding new ones. Therefore, we have a rolling programme of events, workshops, communications to nurture the relationship and keep our supporters involved in the progress. This is where the industry comes into its own, finding a company to match the problem. If somebody wants to work in steel work for SCAPE, yeah, we know the very man to go to. We can actually borrow the steel for the 6 weeks of SCAPE, or we can actually build it into the permanent. We always have a contact somewhere. Somebody once said to me, "You're the worst person in the world to have as a friend, Bob. It always costs us company money." This is an example of actually matching art and a product. Does anybody remember the bikes that were in the square? Yeah, they were an art form on their own. The filled-in wheels were great, except in a Nor'wester. But it allowed people to go at lunchtime in the square, which we can't do now, in the square, get on a bike and go and see the works that are slightly further out. It was fantastic, and people had to book. You had to book in advance to get on them. And that actually, the 20 bikes in the art gallery were available for cycling in the city, and they were accompanied by a map. There was a weekly competition, and there was a cycle voucher was advertised each week. And I think at the end there was what I call a real bike was actually presented. But that was something that matched. It was Solar Energy wanted to do something that they could actually get people around the city, and it worked. And they were really happy with them. This was Fletcher's. When you get companies that match the product. This is Captain Cook from the Victoria Square, rather. Anybody remember him? It was great. The last group of people we had was the Nigerian New Zealand Women's Guild came. Very few of them spoke English, but it was actually, you can see the house on the right. We built a room inside that, and Captain Cook was in the shower. The heritage, any heritage people here today? The heritage was difficult to get through, I can assure you. It was very difficult. But then we started actually offering some other things. When we got up close to Captain Cook, he had a really big crack on his big toe. And that crack, didn't notice it, didn't notice it, nobody had actually recorded it. We were able to, when the scaffolding was round, to sort his big toe. And it took a conservator 2.5 hours to do something that was 20 mils long and 2 millimeters wide. But he's safe again. This was an artwork by Tatsu Uzo that you built up a relationship. I was in here every day. I ended up speaking to him, but he never replied. We had a toilet, etc., and we had problems with the guests that actually came to see him as well, but because the toilet wasn't connected to anything. But that suited Fletcher's because it was houses, it was the industry, but we were actually able to do some good at the same time. Fletcher's were a good sponsor for many years. They're a wee bit busier this time in these years. I knew I'd get him in sometime. You've heard a bit more about Darryn. But Hawkins, the contractor, were one we matched up with Darryn because it was very complicated work, and a small contractor would not have worked. But they were absolutely fantastic. And that matched Hawkins. The board liked it. So that was a great relationship, really one they're shouting about. Sponsorship is one thing, but there's nothing like a good party. And corporates actually like a good party. Now, I did a little wee exercise that if the Bally applied to a potential company for sponsorship, say, worth 20,000, the boardroom go, what am I getting for my buck? That's a lot of money. But it's easier to justify if you break it down. If the tickets, you call it entertainment, the tickets are $50 that they get. The programme's $10 worth, and the glass of wine, the free glass of wine, is $20. So it's $80 per head. If you've got 100 people at that, that's $8,000. So you take that from the 20 they were wanting, you've got 12,000 of sponsorship and $8,000 for entertainment. Corporates always have entertainment, so they actually don't mind that. And 12,000 actually sounds quite reasonable for sponsorship. So I think we've got to be aware of what boards are like, because sponsorship is actually difficult at the moment. Companies have put a lot of their money into what I call worthy causes. Not that this is not a worthy cause, but worthy causes because of the earthquake. But it's going to change, and we're going to have to prepare for the next year of actually getting sponsors who are short of money. But I'm sure we'll get it. Darryn talked about artists working. There's never a dull moment. Working with Regan was fantastic for me because he was self-sufficient, and if he couldn't do it, his father did it. I mean, he was a really good welder himself, but his father, I actually think, was a better welder, so keep that one to yourself. But he was great to work with. But there's always one thing you can pick out where you've helped him. As you can see on that in Flower Power, it's the top. There's the wires that come up the top. See them to give it the wheat look. Regan was going to drill. These are lamp posts with standard lamp heads on them. It's a roads project really. But that wire, he was about to drill through the lights to put these in to fix them on. By doing that, he actually ruined the warranty on the lights. So they had a warranty of 25 years, these lights. So if you start drilling through them, so that was a thing we discussed at length with Regan, and eventually he said, yeah, I don't think he'll forget that. I won't forget it either, but it's one that we've got to pass on to other artists. I just put that one up to see if I can be controversial, but it never seems too controversial. Can you read it up the back? No comment? Excellent, thank you. Becca's the company that I work for. And a few years ago, Becca got involved as a sponsor. And we got involved as a sponsor in a small way, because when Deborah came to do her cell, it's not we didn't believe her, but we were not sure, the board weren't sure what they were getting. But Becca agreed to offer some cash, because it always is king, and some pro bono services, mainly for structural engineering. But we can do project management, cost estimating, consenting, and this and that. So we were actually quite happy to do a bit. We involved our young professionals, mainly, in the structural engineering, because art isn't art until it's built. And when it's built, we now know it's got to stand up. We had young engineers working with young contractors, young consenters in the council, and it was actually really good that all these professionals and the artists all went together. And the thing I've got called the zipper, you've got different levels of people, but all the companies and all the artists actually feed together, and they all grow up together as well. The artists there's a couple we've got in the office, that worked 4 years ago, want to be on the next one, and they want to be on the next one, different artists, but they still keep in contact. Regan Gentry still keeps in contact with 2 engineers in the office. So we gained something in Becca that we didn't think we'd gain, a better relationship with our staff and the art world. And now they want to do more. For SCAPE 13, we've got a waiting list of young people in the office wanting to actually work with artists. And they work weekends, everything. Becca give them time off to work as well. If they have to go to meetings during the week, get time off. And it really is, as a sponsor, that is the most beneficial thing we've got. I don't really worry about what our competitors do. Our staff are interested in art in Christchurch. The board in Becca now are interested in art in Christchurch. And I think last year's bill was a lot bigger than the first year's bill. And it's an investment for us, an investment in our staff, and a big investment in the city. We've just got to make sure the city get it right and we actually get some art to build. Still standing. Very interesting that the best landmarks in Christchurch Central area are the permanent artworks that managed to survive the earthquakes and the aftershocks. I can remember after the first September earthquake, Adrian Lady Stewart phoned me the day after. Had said, "Is it still standing?" Because their family had put in quite a bit of money for the Regan Gentry. So I had to go out and check it, and it was perfect. It hadn't moved. None of them have moved. So for Nucleus, for Phil Price, for The Challenge, for Neil Dawson, for Flower Power, Regan Gentry, and Passing Time, which this one is from Anton Parsons, well done. It's not just great art, it's bloody great engineering. Anton Parsons, whose work that is, was one of the best artists I've ever worked for. He gets embarrassed with me because I'm a real fan. He needed no help whatsoever, didn't accept any help, and he just did everything. He was fantastic to work for. But he phoned as well after the earthquake, and luckily I was walking along St Asaph Street because I worked for a long time in the red zone, and I got a photograph of his foundations, still in perfect condition. And he still has that photograph, which I just emailed when I was sitting there. But fantastic, he really was. Sponsorship in a nutshell is not as interesting as Darryn, but it really is a subject that art and industry will get better at. There's still room for improvement. We're increasing our contacts all the time. And, for artists here, for the next SCAPE, if we offer help, take it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob and Darryn. As you can see, there's a lot of generosity, and there are a lot of businesses who have real passion for Christchurch and the arts, and I think that was a really wonderful summary, Bob, from your personal journey with SCAPE of why Becca get involved. So I hope that was useful for you all. Are there any questions for Bob or Darryn? Any burning questions that haven't been covered?
I was wondering, was it a quick decision, or was it a long, agonizing deliberation with yourself about the first time that you went from just painting by yourself to doing that first project? Because I've asked artists who, paint in similar beautiful ways to also translate their work, and sometimes I get a flat, no, I can't go there.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I think for me, I've come from a teaching background, so a lot of what I do is I actually give instructions to to students and things like that, and you can see it kind of being worked out. So at the start, my first thing was, I think I'm curious as to see what'll happen, but also I felt like if it got into trouble, I possibly could communicate my way through it. So, but again, there was a big unknown, but I was just curious. I just wanted to try and see what would happen. Yeah, and then once I took the first leap, it was almost like a leap of faith, and it worked out. It's like, rightio, let's keep going. So, cheers.